Boston Celtics, one of the greatest teams in NBA history with the most NBA championships. I am here to talk with big Celtics fan Nate King. I reached out to you via Twitter just to sort of canvas and try to find fans, and I was glad we were able to orchestrate this interview.
Thanks for inviting me, and I'm here to talk some sports.
The first thing I wanted to ask you, as a diehard Celtics fan, what led to you becoming a Celtics fan?
Well, I'm from Boston, but believe it or not, Portland was actually my first favorite team. I became a Celtics fan right before the Big Three era with Sebastian Telfair getting traded to Boston.
What is the most memorable moment as a Celtics fan?
Of course, my most memorable moment as a Celtics fan is the Big Three era, but also a couple years ago with Isaiah Thomas eliminating the Wizards from the playoffs. That was a crazy series right after his sister died. And just the heart he showed on the floor. Marcus Smart. I don't know if you remember the team from that year, but that was just a heartfelt team. They were dogs really that year.
Yeah, and I know that's especially before the whole Kyrie going to Boston thing, which
left a bad taste in most Boston fans' mouths.
I feel like that was a completely different. When you look at that team, everybody thought that Kyrie was going to put them over the top, and honestly, he didn't. I feel like they regressed when he was there, but that stuff happens. You think you make a big move for an impact player, and not all the time it works out.
Yeah, no, Kyrie, he has all the talent in the world, but I think he lacks the heart that Boston fans like to see. Like I said, from Isaiah Thomas, it was all heart.
To you, what were the expectations coming into this season with the Celtics? I know after last year's playoffs, the East was going to be a bit of a challenge. Nobody expected Toronto to fall as far as they did, but nobody expected the Nets to sort of stack up their roster. And of course, everybody knew Milwaukee was going to be Milwaukee, but it seems that the East has become very competitive again.
Well, I'm one of the few people who probably predicted Toronto's fall. You got a 30-something-year-old star player who, is about to be on his decline, a bunch of role players who just fit in the system. But like I said, we're here to talk Boston. I think the expectation for Boston this year was kind of shaky because we did lose Gordon Hayward. We didn't really restock. We got Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague, who at this stage of the game are role players. They contributed very well as starters earlier in their career, but now they're not really, that level of player. So it was kind of confusing to see where we gauge ourselves because we've been Eastern Conference finalist teams the last 3 of the 4 seasons. We've been in the Eastern Conference Finals, but we lost key pieces in Kyrie Irving, Al Horford, Marcus Morris, of course, Gordon Hayward. So it's definitely confusing, but, we expect Tatum and Brown to take the leap to get us to the next level this year. And Brown has definitely showed that he is willing to take that next step. Tatum regressed a little bit, but there is the COVID, whether COVID or not affected his cardio. And he's looking very well now in the season. He's starting to get back up to speed.
What is your biggest or most unique piece of Celtics-related memorabilia or clothing do you have? Like a lucky jersey or anything like that?
Yeah, the year the Celtics won the championship, I actually got the luck of going to a Celtics basketball camp with Paul Pierce. My team won the championship. I got to, get a picture with the Celtics banner with Paul Pierce. That year they won the championship. I got a trophy. So that's actually my biggest piece of memorabilia because it happens to coincide the year that they won. I got to meet Paul Pierce. My team won the championship at that camp. So that was definitely a very good year.
What was that like? Especially being around a guy like Paul Pierce. I know now all we think of the ESPN stuff that occurred on Instagram a few weeks ago, but what was Paul Pierce like especially being in that situation?
He's very chill guy. I got to play one-on-one. Well, everyone at the camp really got to, get like a one-score one-on-one game with him.
I can only imagine, especially being a fan of a team like that and be able to meet him. And then, of course, it all coinciding with everything that occurred with the championship. Was there a point in the season that you were extremely confident that the Celtics were making the playoffs?
I mean, the whole time I was confident, but they had a run where they were doing really bad, where I'm like, okay, if they don't make the playoffs, now we got to talk about Brad and Danny. Are they getting fired? Or is Celtics making trade? Are they going to trade Jalen or Tatum? Because this team can't afford to not make the playoffs.
I know there's a lot of hype, especially we were talking about with the Isaiah Thomas led Celtics a few years ago, and all those picks and the shrewd moves that Danny Ainge had made. That this is going to be up and coming team. Do you feel like at a point they've peaked too early, especially in their development, especially with all the guys with Marcus Smart and Tatum and Brown?
It's not that I feel like they peaked too early, as far as I feel like the team was kind of set up earlier in their run. as a championship contender with, of course, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, vets like Marcus Morris off the bench, a bunch of guys who were win now kind of players. And then you also have on the roster more guys who are developing, of course, Rozier, who's now, on the Hornets. You have Tatum, Brown. So it was kind of two halves, the tale of two halves. Warriors are kind of dealing with the situation too with Wiseman and the picks they have, where you have the guys who want to win now and guys who want to win later. So now that all the guys are off the team who are kind of win now, the Celtics are kind of true young team that's building to a championship, not a half old, half young team. It's completely Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's team. So yeah, it's not that I feel like they regressed. I feel like it's a different team.
Do you feel that Kemba Walker, it's interesting, you're replacing Kyrie with Kemba. You think Kemba would have elevated his game, especially we saw that his reputation, especially in college basketball, playing at UConn and then playing with the Hornets and things like that, the big game mentality that he has. Do you feel like Kemba's underperforming or?
Kemba's definitely underperforming. I don't know if injury is a excuse for that. I mean, it is an excuse, but as a fan, we kind of don't respect that as, an excuse or the fan base. But I definitely think the Celtics probably should have traded Kemba at the deadline and maybe seen if they could have got Lonzo or something. I feel like Kemba's time in Boston is kind of winding down unless they win a championship this playoff.
Yeah, it just seems like you went from Isaiah Thomas, then you go to Kyrie Irving thinking that's going to be the guy that puts him over the top. And then you end up just sort of just parting ways and going with Kemba Walker thinking, okay, we see how he was clutch in Charlotte. And just now, again, it feels like now he's more of a supplemental piece instead of the guy.
Yeah. And that wouldn't be an issue. We definitely could use Tatum and Brown stepping up. If Tatum and Brown are the main contributors and then, we get Kemba Walker in spurts and hits big shots, that would be fine too. But, we haven't seen that much from Kemba either. So, I don't know if I can trust him in that role right now.
Looking at the Eastern Conference playoffs, who do you feel the Celtics match up the best with?
Definitely a lot of teams. Philly swept us during the season, but I would not be scared to see Philly. Milwaukee is definitely a deep team. I think we can match up good with Philly or Milwaukee. Brooklyn kind of scares me just because their offensive power. We don't have enough great defenders this year to really combat that, and we're not the offensive team that they are. But any other team in the Eastern Conference playoffs, I would not be scared to see them.
You mentioned the Nets, but anybody else in the East that sort of gives you a little worries, especially some of the lower teams, Miami, especially if they start getting their act together?
Yeah. If Miami gets their act together, it's going to be a repeat of last year where they were, a fifth seed, and earlier in the season they didn't look like championship contenders at all and made the finals. You never know when it comes to Miami, so of course. But I have confidence in Brad Stevens. He's been one of the most successful coaches of the last 5 years. Hands down. Danny Ainge, despite his lack of making big trades, has been one of the most successful GMs of the past 5 years. So, I have confidence in the Celtics staff for what they're doing.
Looking at some of the other teams, who's someone that you thought, wow, I didn't think they were going to be this good?
Hornets for sure. They stole Terry Rozier from us 2 years ago, stole Gordon Hayward from us last year. They drafted LaMelo Ball, who I was a big fan of in this last draft. And they're putting together a nice team. They look like they might be 2 years away from, or one piece away from actually being maybe a contender. And if LaMelo Ball hits that next step, it could be amazing for them in Charlotte. Other teams that are surprising, of course, Philly. Nobody expected them to be the first seed. It gives Doc Rivers, who's our former coach, a lot of credit where he lost so much credit in Clippers land, not succeeding with them. But then he goes to Philly and completely turns that around, and Daryl Morey as well, making that team look so good. Milwaukee is always going to do Milwaukee things as long as they have Giannis, so not really a surprise there. The surprises in the East are more like Toronto, even though, like I said, I did predict that they would fall eventually, but I know a lot of people are surprised they fell. Miami not doing as good, and the Wizards as well. It's more the bad teams are the surprises in the East to me.
Yeah, and I think, like we're talking with Miami, if they can get everything together, plus they have Oladipo, that could be a very scary proposition to anybody to face those teams in the playoffs. I mean, if they get out of the play-in rounds and they're not the ones ended up getting knocked out in the round robin, because it could be anybody.
Yeah, I really want the Wizards to, make the play-in and then make the playoffs. I think the playoffs would be wrong without seeing Bale and Westbrook in it.
Yeah, which is crazy because especially I think they owe the Rockets a draft pick if they don't make the playoffs, because the last thing you want to do is miss the playoffs, end up having the number one pick and end up going to Houston because Scott Brooks is probably going to be on his way out anyway, because the only reason they hired Scott Brooks was just to ensure that KD went to Washington, and that didn't happen. Yep. And now they're sort of stuck. They didn't fire him any other time before. They might as well just sort of let him ride out this last year of his contract, because I doubt he's coming back.
Definitely, unless they can get a strong playoff push. They look like they're about to make the play-in spot if they can get in the playoffs and then, make a deep run. Who knows? It's Westbrook and Bale at the end of the day. So I think teams that, don't think the Wizards are good should be scared of that. Yeah. They play their best basketball in the playoffs. Yeah,
if Beal's healthy, that's the other thing. If Beal's not healthy, it's going to be the same old story for Westbrook, just sort of having to carry them and just seeing what happens.
Definitely. And then the fact that they might end up seeing Brooklyn in the first round, if they do make it that far, could be definitely a headline series.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only thing scarier is just like John Wall magically showed up in the East. That would have been even scarier than facing them in the playoffs. Looking at the NBA Finals predictions, who do you have coming out of the Eastern Conference? Who do you have coming out of the Western Conference? Who wins the finals and in how many games?
It's hard because, of course, I want to say the Celtics, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more not of a homer right now. I would say this year, I'm going to go Milwaukee out of the East, and I'll go Clippers out the West.
Why the Clippers? I know there's a lot of competition, Utah, Phoenix, and everybody else. Why the Clippers?
Teams like Utah and Phoenix really scare me in Denver. I would put them in that category as well. As far as not being real contenders, but looking like contenders. They're just, those teams to me are known for that. Not Phoenix, as they just got back to that level, but Denver, Utah, Portland, those teams always look really great and then just never kind of do anything in the playoffs. So I don't know, maybe Chris Paul might make Phoenix legit. Maybe Utah, how they're playing this year is for real, but I just don't believe in those teams. Lakers, they're going to have to show me they can be healthy. I know there might be a chance that they're just resting LeBron and AD and hoping that they can get them back in the playoffs and 100% health, 100% cardio, everything. But I just don't think it's good for business to not have them on the court at this stage. I'm going to go Clippers in 6 games.
Wow. I mean, I guess in this case, that'll sort of validate them letting go of Doc Rivers if they make it. But I think Paul George really has to step up, because all his talks about how things were last year and he really did not show up when it mattered. The Clippers' fates are not going to be on Kawhi Leonard. It's going to be on Paul George, because if he doesn't show up, it's just going to be another year of everybody just saying him running his mouth and him doing nothing.
Definitely. The Clippers, I feel like getting eliminated where they did last year, it's hard to say it's the best thing for them, but it really was, because they kind of came in with so much swagger and cockiness. They need to get knocked back down to earth and realize when playoffs come around, it's the little things that matter, and it's playing with chemistry, playing with ball movement. The little things they forgot. They thought they were too talented and they were just going to knock over all the competition, and then they almost lost to Dallas, and then they did lose to Denver. So they're really going to have to come with a lot of energy this year, and I think they know that. So I think they're going to do a lot better.
Do you have any social media where people can reach out to you if they want to talk a little bit of Celtics, talk a little NBA or anything else?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You could reach me at my Instagram, at Newberry, NEWBRYY. And yeah, we can talk basketball there, and hopefully, I can come on here again and talk ball. Definitely is a great feeling podcast, and I hope we wish you all the success.